All right, on a slightly breezy day here at Gettysburg, here's the Pennsylvania Memorial. It was erected in 1910 for $182,000. It's got the names of all the 34,530 men who fought at Gettysburg for the Union on 90 plaques around the base. As you come up, you can actually see names, and once in a while, you'll be able to catch some of those who would have suffered casualties here. In a broader sense, casualties are killed, wounded, captured, or missing. I'm Garry Adelman. I'm from the American Battlefield Trust, and this is one of our Battlefield Lives, although this is the first one we've ever done with just one person. This is a YouTube Live, so I hope you're already on our YouTube channel and you are starting to comment. I see somebody already commenting that you love this battlefield. So do I. I'm doing this alone, so I'll do my best to respond to your comments, answer your questions as we can as we walk around Gettysburg just a little. I'm going to do a lot of this in first-person shooter format as we climb the Pennsylvania Memorial so we can talk about the Battle of Gettysburg right here, because what a beautiful place. For those of you who haven't been here before, this is just a really beautiful place to come and an important and relevant one. So in summary, as I pan around, just know that it's July of 1863. In June of 1863, the Southerners had just won a huge smashing victory with their commander, Robert E. Lee, at a place called Chancellorsville. The Confederates were outnumbered 2-1, but they were able to whip the Northern Army just like they did on every other occasion. So the Southerners decide to invade the North. That's in that direction there. They're going to come up into the North before the Union Army really gets started. They're going to spread out toward Chambersburg and Harrisburg and York, Pennsylvania, all over this part of Pennsylvania, creating quite a bit of havoc up here. The Union Army's under a new commander, George Gordon Meade. I'm hearing that my connection is not very good up here, so I'm going to keep moving here. Meade will pursue quickly, and that will result in the Battle of Gettysburg. It's going to last 3 days. It's right in the middle of the Civil War. Let's see if my connection improves as I come over this way. It's in the middle of the Civil War, and you are going to have this terrible battle on these very fields here. Not around here, not somewhere else, not somewhere where we're just guessing. Here. This is where the soldiers struggled. We know who struggled where on these 3 days, and right now we're where they fought on the second day and on the third day. On the second day, a small regiment of Minnesota troops, a regiment is usually about 300 men, and this was just under there. They charged into a superior force of Confederates and suffered 82% casualties right out there. How do we know that? Well, because they wrote about it, they put monuments up about it, both sides talked about what happened in this little swale here, and this is just one part of this giant battlefield. It's 25 square miles. You can't possibly see the whole thing in a short period of time, so we'll bring you videos as we can. We, of course, have a lot of videos already on our YouTube page under Live from the Battlefield or Battlefield Lives. You're also going to see a lot of our videos on our Facebook page as well, where we have, more than 100 live videos from various battlefields, not just Gettysburg, but Antietam, Vicksburg, all over the place as we go around. So again, we're on the second and the third day's battlefield, and I'm making my way toward what we're really going to talk about today, and that is Longstreet's assault, or Pickett's charge, or the high water mark of the Confederacy. And that's right off in that direction over there. But let me back up for a second again. I'm Garry and I'm with the American Battlefield Trust. This is live, Battlefield Live on YouTube here. Share this on whatever social media you have so more people can see it, and then it makes more sense for us to do these things. And I'm going to shoot most of this in first-person shooter mode like this so you can see the battlefield instead of looking at me and my sunburnt face as we go around here today. So I'm going to get a little view over here so that we can talk about more of the battlefield. But just know that there's 3 days to this battle, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1863. On the first day, the Confederates win a huge victory. They smashed the Union Army, pushed them back through the town of Gettysburg, which is over that hill in that direction. About 2,400 people lived here at the time. And the Southerners take the battlefield, take the town, and win. The second day is sort of a tie when the Union, I'm saying my connection is bad back there. Let me move up here a little bit and see if I can help at all. YouTube actually tells me when the connection isn't good. If you are watching this and the connection is bad or you can't hear me, let me know as we go along, as we try to get better with this technology here. I'm going to move north a little bit from here, but on the second day, the Union forms in the shape of a fish hook like this. This is behind me, and this is right in front of me. So the fish hook sort of goes along this ridge I'm on here. Cemetery Ridge curves around Cemetery Hill over to another hill called Culp's Hill over there in the distance. I'm going to continue to move, hopefully in hopes of getting a better connection over here as we go. So on the second day, the Confederates attack at places you've probably heard of: Little Round Top, the Wheat Field, the Peach Orchard, Devil's Den, Culp's Hill, but can't really make any movement. But they did have some success, or near success, in the center right up here. And this is the center, which we also call Pickett's Charge up here. And the Confederates, with just 2,000 soldiers, with some support on one side, moved across these fields you see over here and actually made it all the way to the Union line here on Cemetery Ridge. Seminary Ridge, the Confederate position over there, in the trees in the distance. So this is the field of Pickett's Charge you're looking at. Pickett's Charge takes place on the third day. Robert E. Lee, the Confederate commander. Good, and thanks, Chris, for telling me that the sound is loud and clear and everything. I'm really glad to hear that. Thank you. So you're looking at this whole field over here. This will be called the field of Pickett's Charge. Now, many people call Pickett's Charge, you know, something like Longstreet's Assault or the Pickett Pettigrew Trimble Assault. Call it what you will. It's popularly known as Pickett's Charge, however. And what that is a grand assault of 12,000 soldiers coming across this field on the last day of the Battle of Gettysburg. And I'll talk about that shortly, as much as I can, as I don't lose my breath as we walk around. A brief pause to say you're with the American Battlefield Trust. You're on YouTube. This is a Battlefield Live. We do these on Facebook a lot of the times. This is the first one we've ever done where it's just one person doing it. So I'll be reading your comments as best as I can, trying to keep the connectivity, trying to walk around and keep my breath as I walk around as well. The American Battlefield Trust, by the way, we save battlefields and we tell stories about American history, and especially about where the key decisions were made and where America became America. It's hard to see without battlefields, without American victories in the Revolutionary War at places like Princeton or at places like Yorktown, how the Declaration of Independence could have even taken hold at all. Courthouses, Congress, those things are really important, but issues are ultimately decided in American history often on battlefields, and this is what we talk about, this is what we educate about, and this is why we're live on YouTube right now. Getting back to this over here. So you see a lot of monuments on this battlefield here. Wow, there's a tall one over there, there's a shorter one, here's a different type of one over here. Well, for those of you who haven't been to Gettysburg, there's more monuments here than anywhere in the world, I believe. That is what Vermont wanted to do to honor their brigade of about 1,800 soldiers that fought here. This is what one of the Vermont guys did. And if you went up close, you'd be able to see a hatchet under his foot, because that particular soldier, a guy named Brown, actually captured some Confederate soldiers using a camp hatchet. And to the various units here. This one is, of course, to an artillery unit, and you're seeing two cannons over here. These are bronze or brass guns here. These are bronze. These are Napoleon guns. These are the actual tubes that were in the Civil War. If you looked at the front of it right here, you could see this gun could have been in this battle because it was made in 1863. We could read more about it and learn. I can see it's the 138th gun to come out of this foundry, which I can't read. The barrel weighs 1,238 pounds. You wonder why these don't get stolen. And these are replica iron carriages, which themselves are more than 100 years old. The original carriages were made of wood. So this particular unit, Battery C 5th U.S., they were proud of what they did here. So they put up this monument here so you could actually read it. So now walking toward Pickett's Charge, as we look at one of our witness trees at Gettysburg. We call witness trees that if they were here during the Battle of Gettysburg, and I'm trying to block the wind as I walk around here as well. So that's one of at least 10 witness trees we have. We probably have more at Gettysburg as well. But you can really well see, hey, this is where the Union line was. Not just their line, you can actually see some sort of works in here. Part of this line would have been dotted by a low stone wall. We're talking about 2 feet high or less, but this is where each unit was, okay? There's the 1st Minnesota up there. You'll be able to see the 20th Massachusetts, the 59th New York, the 82nd New York right up here as well. Good, and I'm glad you are liking the lives. Thanks for the comments here. We always have some Southerners on here looking to represent their interests. And let's see, I couldn't quite catch that last comment about Lexington and Concord. We have saved some land at Lexington as well, and I'll continue to look at your comments as best I can as I walk around here. I can see a particular monument up here to a guy named General Gibbons. So some monuments are to units, like this unit right here, artillery unit. Some are to brigades, like this monument over here. Some is to one type of soldier. This is the United States Regulars. This is the regular army, not the volunteers who were just joined or drafted for wartime, but rather the U.S. Regulars. They would have been the 3rd U.S., the 5th U.S., the 2nd U.S., and all their associated artillery units as well. This one is to a person. The original monuments, the first monuments were to people, and then the actual units came along and started putting monuments up here. By the way, you see this is a pretty open field right here. If you go elsewhere at Gettysburg, you see exceedingly rocky terrain where you don't even have to touch any grass to walk around. Well, that is because of a thing called the Gettysburg Sill. Okay, the Gettysburg Sill runs from diagonally across these parts through those hills. That's Big Round Top there and Little Round Top there, and it goes diagonally across this battlefield, and that's why there's rocks on Culp's Hill and on the Round Tops, but not here at the field of Pickett's charge. Let me slow down a second again. You know, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. We are live on YouTube right now. I hope you can share this on your social media, whichever particular one you use, or watch it later. Just try to spread the word about this, and we'll do more of these on YouTube. We generally do these on Facebook. You can catch existing Facebook Lives from weeks and months ago on our YouTube page. Just look for Live from the Battlefield or Battlefield Live. I'm going to move again because it looks like my connection is getting bad again. So I'm going to try to reestablish this. This is one of of doing this, these live events out on battlefields. So I'm going to try to move to a better connection here. There are 3 days again in the Battle of Gettysburg. The first, where the Confederates win. The second, which is sort of a tie. And July 3rd, which is going to be a massive Union victory, culminating in the charge that I want to talk a little bit about up here, called Pickett's Charge, or Longstreet's Assault, or you know, the Pickett, Pettigrew, Trimble charge. Which one rolls off the tongue best? Call it what you like, but Pickett's charge is the name that actually stuck. You could see a stone wall right up here. These stone walls were not built by the troops, most of the ones at Gettysburg, rather by the thrifty Pennsylvania Dutch farmers who had to clear their fields of stone anyway. So they simply marked their property lines with stone walls, and troops were glad to use them when it made sense. Now, up to July 3rd, 1863, Robert E. Lee, the Confederate commander, whose monument you're actually going to see in a second, right across the field on Seminary Ridge. Since I haven't done this before yet myself, can I zoom in during a live? Oh, yes, I can. So let's see what I can point out over there in the distance. You might be able to see Robert E. Lee's monument. It's really the Virginia Memorial, on which Robert E. Lee sits atop on his favorite horse, Traveler, there. And you know, on the previous 2 days, Lee had made some gains. On the first day, he won a huge decisive victory on the first day. On the second day, it's kind of a tie. The Confederates grabbed some of this middle ground near the peach orchard over here, but they couldn't quite ascend Little Round Top. They captured Devil's Den in that direction over there, and they captured some of this middle ground. They reached this very position here. Some say he got as far as that monument in front of us. Some say he got as far as this road. The road was not here at the time. Some say he got even farther, but the Confederates, Georgians, pushed through the line here at is what now known as the copse of trees, or the clump of trees. But on July 2nd, they couldn't stay, so they left. So Lee reasoned a few things. You know, if 2,000 guys could cross this field on July 2nd, why not 15,000 doing it the next day on July 3rd? Well, he didn't have 15,000 in the attack the next day. And, you know, as some said later, the Union Army might have something to say about what might happen the next day. Namely, the Union commander, whose monument you can see over there, George Gordon Meade. And Meade has been in command of the Army for exactly now 5 days before Pickett's charge is happening, and he sort of suspects that Lee might attack in this area. In fact, he told one of his commanders, John Gibbon, whose monument you see over there, if Lee attacks tomorrow, he said this on the night of the 2nd, it will be on your front. And whether or not that happened, and whether he only told Gibbon, doesn't really matter. The fact is that once the Confederates attacked up here, the Union is going to end up with overwhelming reinforcements here, sent here by George Gordon Meade. We're talking 10, 15, 20, I even think 25,000 soldiers ordered toward the Union center. Now, before I get into Pickett's charge, let me just say a little bit about the Union position. So we are looking in the direction of Culp's Hill, over that way there, okay? So the Union position is a fish hook. It's sort of like this, and you're looking at the barb of the hook over there. It curves around this hill, doesn't look like much of a hill now, called Cemetery Hill, and then it is going to go along this ridge, Cemetery Ridge, where you see all the monuments and trees going up toward Little Round Top, which is right over there. That's generally speaking the fish hook position. It never exactly reached that entire configuration, but we are in the center of the line, therefore. We're right in the sort of the center of it's hard to get your fish hook right sometimes, right in the middle of the fish hook here. And on July 3rd, 1863, Robert E. Lee, with the mountains to his back, in enemy territory. You can see the mountains off in the distance. Those are part of the Appalachian monuments, by the way. Appalachian mountains, excuse me, by the way. You know, he's in enemy territory. He has numerous times before driven a superior number, numerically superior number of Union troops away from a position, doing this by himself. So he figures maybe if he really attacks here, maybe he can reach this position, cut the Union Army in two, and drive the Union Army from the field, and then maybe even interpose himself between the Union Army and Washington, D.C. Maybe he can end the Civil War right in the summer of 1863. Maybe he can destroy the Union Army and do whatever he wants in the North, which would almost surely end in some sort of a negotiated settlement if he could rove freely through the whole Northern territories. However, I think we know how this ends. It's going to be July 3rd, 1863, much like today, the hottest day of the summer. There's no wind like there is, like I can't feel any wind right now, and it is quiet. A lot of people are thinking there's not going to be a battle on this day. On the Union line, people are eating lunch, they're lounging, they're probably grateful that the expected attack has not come at this point, when suddenly at about 1 o'clock, two cannons erupt from the Confederate line over on Seminary Ridge, and then 158 more are going to concentrate on this position here. The Union responds with 100 cannons on a huge line from Cemetery Hill to my right, down Cemetery Ridge to my left, and for about an hour and a half, this is the largest bombardment ever heard upon this continent. Some say all the way until, the loudest noise all the way until the nuclear bomb was tested at Los Alamos laboratory. We'll see if we could prove that someday or not. But either way, you could hear it many miles away, 10 miles, 20 miles, 50 miles away. But it was a really still day, so the smoke just sat here on July 3rd. Usually there's a wind like there is right now to carry some of the smoke away. So the smoke just sat here. No one could see what they were shooting at, and most of the Confederate shells flew harmlessly behind me over the Union position on the other side of this ridge over here. Let me see if I can read that question. This is Star Wars Bob from the thing. Hi, Star Wars Bob. I remember you now. It's hard for me to read comments while I'm doing it. In any case, these Confederate projectiles flew harmlessly over the Union position. Some were supposed to explode and didn't because of faulty fuses. Others were just aimed too high because they couldn't see what they were shooting at. And the important part is that the Union had plenty of cannons up here when the Confederates are going to launch their attack on July 3rd here across this field of Pickett's charge. Now, before I get into that, let me just make sure everybody knows that this thing that you've heard about the North sort of being more industrial and the South being more agricultural is as real as it gets. The Union always had more cannons, almost always had more ammunition, almost always had a better likelihood of their ammunition exploding. The South always lacked those things. They never had enough factories, enough ships, and in fact, get this, as the historian Garry Gallagher concluded, for every Southern factory worker, the North had an entire factory. Okay, wrap your brain around that, and then you'll get an idea of what sort of industrial capabilities the Union had compared to the Confederates. Before I continue on this story of Pickett's charge, I'm Garry Adelman with the American Battlefield Trust. You're watching Battlefield Live here on YouTube. This is the first one we've ever done completely with just one person, so I'm trying to read the comments and do the commentary and keep this thing going all at the same time. So work with us if you can. If you want to watch some of our more professional lives, go to our Facebook page where we have more than 100 Battlefield Lives from all over the country. Chattanooga, Antietam, Vicksburg, Fredericksburg, Spotsylvania, Chancellorsville. We've been all over the place live, and of course at least 90 of those things, 80 or so here at Gettysburg. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but either way there's a real lot. So come join us on our Facebook page, or look at YouTube where we have at least a dozen of these other Battlefield Lives. I recommend the Sunken Road at Fredericksburg. It's the first one on that playlist when you go to the American Battlefield Trust YouTube page. In any case, so the South is really industrially outclassed by the Union. The Union just has every superiority, and it plays out in every battle they fight. The Union has better artillery and more things like that. But nonetheless, at about 3 o'clock on July 3rd, 1863, the Union is lined up behind this low stone wall, and it was not really any taller than this at the time. Plus, this area called the Angle would have been brambly. It's not this nicely manicured place. There were small trees and bushes all over the place. There were some cannons here in the Angle. This is called the Angle, by the way, because the way that wall goes over there, and then it's going to go over to that tree there and then angle back toward the road and continue. That is important only because there's Union troops along the road, and Union troops along this wall, but none along this wall. It meant the ends of two Union lines were in the air and not touching. That's never a good thing, okay? The Confederates, for their part, are not only in the distant woods over there on Seminary Ridge. You've got Pettigrew's division out in that way. They had fought heavily on the first day. They're going to be supported by a couple of brigades. Brigades are about 1,500 to 2,000 soldiers each. They're under Trimble. They had actually fought on the first day as well, so they had only a one-day rest. And then over in this direction, not so much in the woods, but in the hollows behind these barns here. That barn, not here during the battle, but the house next to it actually was the Cadore House. It was built in the 1840s, and it maintains the names, like all the buildings on the battlefield, of the people who lived here at the time of the battle. Pickett's men, for whom Pickett's charge is named, are going to be in the hollows off in that direction there. Okay, so they don't have as far to go, but they're going to have to angle toward the position, whereas Pettigrew's men are going to come off in this direction. There are supposed to be Alabama and Florida troops supporting this attack as well. Either way, 12,000 soldiers are going to advance across this field, and that is why a great moan goes up from a Union line at about 3 o'clock p.m. on July 3rd, 1863, when you were going to have these 12,000 Confederate troops emerge from the woods or from their hidden hollows. And it was beautiful, like a parade ground, supposedly, the way the Confederates emerged and marched like they were in perfect military drill at this time. It was beautiful, but not for long, because the Union is going to open up with long-range artillery fire. They're going to tear gaps into the Confederate line. And if this guy falls out, the guy next to him will close up and move over. So this guy gets shot, this guy moves up. So while they're advancing across this field, they are closing to the right or the left to keep their troops together as they move across this field. And by the way, it is tempting for people to say, oh, you know, if I was in the Civil War, I wouldn't have fought that way. I would have been much smarter than people in the Civil War, because they just got in shoulder to shoulder and marched and shot at each other. They must have been stupid. No. Okay, these people did not have a death wish. They were not unintelligent. A lot of them were trained in the military arts, but they were using the most modern military tactics they had available to them, and those tactics included massed formations to deliver maximum firepower at the same time. And of all the people I've run into, hundreds, who seem to think they're smarter than Civil War soldiers and would have done it some better way, I have not heard a viable way to break an enemy position, given the technologies and the people they had back then, other than sending a whole lot of troops across. Okay, if there was a possibility to use cavalry or use a wedge formation or to use artillery to soften a position, they thought of it too. You're not the only one. Okay, so the Confederates are coming across like they did the day before, but in great numbers on July 3rd. It's a hot day, no wind at all, and the Union is starting to tear apart the Confederates, coming from that way, Pickett's men, and this way, Pettigrew's and Trimble soldiers here. And the Union are having a good time of it here. Now, a few things happen when the Confederates reach the Emmitsburg Road. You've seen some cars coming through there as we go around there. You know, I see someone in Florida saying, yes, they were extremely brave coming across this field. I think only them, only their comrades, and knowing that they were working with their comrades allowed them to do this. I think soldiers in the modern military are the same way. I don't think soldiers are any braver back then than today. In any case, you can see that car over there bisecting the position at the Emmitsburg Road. And when the Confederates reached the Emmitsburg Road, a few things happened. First of all, the Union commander, who you might not be able to see because of the sun, yes you can, George Gordon Meade, has long figured out that this is where the Confederate attack is coming. And he's ordering reinforcements from everywhere on his line, from over near Culp's Hill, from the Union center, from over on the Union left, and everybody's beginning to converge here. Also, the Union line, which is pretty straight, I already pointed this out, bulges out so that the Vermonters turn out and advance like this, and then some New York and Ohio soldiers bulge out and turn like this, and now the Confederates are going to be advancing into a three-sided box with Vermonters over there, Ohio and New York soldiers over here, and the main line on the inside of the box. The Confederates are going to be advancing into a great pinchers here, but they've still got numerical superiority, but now they were within Union rifle range, and the Union soldiers who are behind these low positions here are going to begin to, they're going to already have their muskets loaded. They're going to rise up from behind the stone wall here and start to deliver close range musketry fire at 100, 200, 350 yards away at the Confederates coming off in the distance here. It's really intense moments here. The Confederates still come on. They're closing up. They're reaching the line, and Pickett's men begin to come up and scare away some of the men of the 71st Pennsylvania and the 72nd Pennsylvania over here. And the Confederates are threatening to take this stone wall here. Pettigrew's men have moved up and are beginning their final charge up toward the Bryan farm. Bryan, a free black man living with his family just 10 miles north or less of the Mason-Dixon line, was not here during the fighting. That became a Yankee headquarters, as a matter of fact. So Pettigrew's men are moving there. Now, a Confederate reserve brigade under Lewis Armistead. This is the famous part of the fight. Armistead puts his hat up on his sword and says, "Follow me, boys, give them the cold steel," and begins to lead his men over here. They capture the stone wall. Armistead's men and other men from Pickett move over the stone wall here. The 69th Pennsylvania bend back into the clump of trees over there. Those are not the trees that were here during the battle, but they are some of the same types of trees and in the same place. The clump was a little bit smaller at the time, especially in height as we go along. You were going to have the Pennsylvanians bending back. The Confederates pour over the wall over here. The Confederates in that direction are beginning to reach the stone wall over near Abraham Bryan's house over there. It's not looking good for the Union, but now a lot of other things are happening. As the Confederates pour over this wall, you're going to have Alonzo Cushing, his battery, United States battery over here. Cushing's been shot in the groin. He's been shot elsewhere, and he is actually beginning to, his troops are beginning to waver. He's going to say, let's give them one last shot. And these guns, which are run up all the way to the wall for the time, blow off one last shot. He falls dead as a result of his wounds. He will be awarded the Medal of Honor just a few years ago himself for his actions here at Gettysburg. And the Confederates pour over the wall, capture the guns. Armistead, with his hat up on his sword, reaches the guns, tries to turn one of them around. And if you could stand still, if time could stand still right there, the Confederates have achieved their objective. Okay, they've punctured the Union position. They've poured over this Union position over here, but time does not stand still. Armistead will be immediately mortally wounded on supposedly this spot in one of the oldest monuments, the oldest Confederate monuments on the whole battlefield, and right inside the Union lines. Most of the Confederate monuments, long story, are over on the Confederate line, but there are scores of Confederate monuments at Gettysburg. Here, Armistead's is right here. And when he falls, all these Union reinforcements, Massachusetts, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, are starting to arrive. I mean, 10, 15,000 reinforcements are beginning to arrive here from all directions. And while these thousands of reinforcements arrive, the Confederates have a couple of hundred soldiers who have crossed this wall, and it's not even close. It goes from a moment of great promise into, by far, Robert E. Lee's greatest defeat. The Confederates retreated, and retreated quickly, to the Union huzzas, yelling "Fredericksburg, Fredericksburg," saying they finally got the Confederates back for the wholesale destruction they'd received from them several months earlier. The Union, is really psyched. They finally won. The Confederates barely mustered 6,000 of the 12,000 soldiers who made the attack 45 minutes or an hour later on Seminary Ridge. The Union captured 23 battle flags in this attack, more than they'd ever captured the entire war up to that point combined. It was simply an unbelievable victory for the Union. They finally won, and it's the middle of the war, although they didn't know that at that time. They finally won. Now, the Confederates over there, Robert E. Lee took responsibility for the attack, as a good commander should. This is all my fault. Let's get together and fight another day, okay? The Union commander, George Gordon Meade, who finally became the first one to solidly beat Robert E. Lee on a battlefield, was later criticized for not counterattacking across this same open field. Well, I don't really buy that so much. I wasn't here, but from what I know, you don't get 10, 15, 20,000 soldiers moving just like that. The Confederates did have reinforcements and ammunition back there as well. And why would he want to attack across the same open fields that he just slaughtered Lee's army on? I don't really blame him. Of course, then the next day, Robert E. Lee, saying a lot about his character, sat there on the other side with his troops, even though he suffered this devastating defeat, and said, "Come on, Meade, attack me. I dare you." Okay, because maybe he could even odds that way. Meade did not take the bait on July 4th. That night, Robert E. Lee pulls back through the mountains. 9 days later, gets back into Virginia, and this war goes on for 2 more years. So then people, and when I say people, I can only mean politicians, criticize George Gordon Meade for not bagging the Confederate army at Gettysburg. And let me get this straight. Nobody even beat Robert E. Lee before, at least handily, and then someone beats him and they want you to capture that entire army. Well, as my friend and historian Tim Smith often says, Robert E. Lee didn't want to surrender. He's an extraordinarily dangerous opponent. You don't bag 50,000 men under Robert E. Lee. It was hard enough after 10 months of straight fighting the following year and into 1865 when he's 20,000 starving and outnumbered 5-1. It's hard enough to bag Robert E. Lee then. So, it was an unreasonable criticism of George Gordon Meade. Nonetheless, Meade tenders his resignation, and Lincoln says, whoa, hey, it wasn't that bad. Lee tenders his resignation. You could imagine Jefferson Davis reacting to that like he's going to let Robert E. Lee go. And these men go on to command their armies till the end of the war. Lee in command of the Army of Northern Virginia. Meade in command of the Army of the Potomac. But the following year would see U.S. Grant in charge of all the Union armies, and he knew how to end the war. You know, the worse it is, the sooner it'll be over, and let's push on toward Lee's army every day. And so they did for 10 months, and that will result in the Confederate surrender actually at Appomattox. Now, I saw one question along here, which I tried to address earlier in the live. You know, we call it Pickett's Charge because that's the popular name. It rolls off the tongue. But other names have included the not rolling off the tongue, Pickett, Pettigrew, Trimble assault. There's also Longstreet's assault. It just isn't, it didn't capture the imaginations of people, and that has bothered the North Carolinians for a long time. See, North Carolinians don't always get along with people from their neighboring states of Virginia and South Carolina. In fact, they call their state a valley of humility, surrounded by two mountains of conceit. So, you know, naming things is political. In this case, you know, Pickett's Charge won out, and that's what we call it. It would be very laborious for me to say all three names every time I did it, so I hope you understand here. As we wrap things up, I'm just going to walk along the Union line here. You can see that when the Stonewall ended, they also managed to dig some works. Yes, in 1863, they did not really erect earthworks as a matter of fact, but they did it sometimes at Gettysburg. And I see, Brian, yes, you're saying General Meade is the greatest general in American history. My friend Tim Smith would certainly agree with that. I'll let you all argue about that. You can continue the discussion here on YouTube or go to our Facebook page. Again, you're with the American Battlefield Trust. I'm Adelman. This is the first attempt to do one of these things with just one person. We'd love to know what you thought of this approach, or if you think we need a crew of 3 or 4 or 5 in order to do this properly. Also, do you want to see more of these on YouTube, or do you prefer them on Facebook or on Instagram or Insta TV? We're going to start trying them all out a little bit more if we can. Look for us, by the way, on Facebook and possibly on YouTube as well for Chickamauga 155, where we're going to be on the Chickamauga battlefield. Yes, we're going west. We're going to Georgia on September 19th and 20th. If we can get out there on other days, we will as well. So let me look. Somebody's a Hancock fan. I was trying to walk out to where Hancock was wounded over here, but I was losing connectivity here. So let me wrap this up. We are at the Gettysburg battlefield. You've been watching the American Battlefield Trust on a battlefield live on YouTube. We have a lot of these on our YouTube page already. You can see more than 100 on our Facebook page. The American Battlefield Trust, we save battlefields, okay? We don't necessarily save prisons, hospitals, and headquarters unless there was fighting there. We save the land where American soldiers really helped to make America, America. Where the Declaration of Independence, the Emancipation Proclamation, where our ideals were formed and solidified, where the ultimate issues were decided were on battlefields. We've saved more than 50,000 acres of land in 24 states around the United States from the Civil War, the War of 1812, and the American Revolution. So if you haven't checked us out yet, go to battlefields.org. We have more Civil War content than anyone else, and soon enough we'll have more Rev War and 1812 content than anyone else. I'm Garry Adelman on behalf of the entire American Battlefield Trust. Check us out, get to know us, and thank you for supporting battlefield preservation.